So today's video is all about Ponzi fraud schemes. Not how to set one up, but how to avoid being conned. So we'll take a look at what a Ponzi scheme is. They've been in the news a lot recently. The 3 key ingredients to a Ponzi scheme, in my opinion, and how you avoid becoming the next victim. Okay, so what are Ponzi frauds? Well, there have been several high-profile examples recently. There was the Bernie Madoff scheme collapsing in the US, Alan Stanford's scheme collapsing in the US. Those 2 guys, well, Bernie Madoff's in prison, Stanford's just being sentenced at the moment. And of course, recently in the UK, the thought to be biggest ever Ponzi scheme run by an Indian whose name I can't pronounce has just been uncovered, and he's also been sent to jail. All right, so Ponzi schemes are, if you like, very common at the moment. Now, what are the key ingredients? First of all, why are they called Ponzi schemes? Well, for the simple reason that a chap called Charles Ponzi pioneered one of the earlier schemes in the first part of the 20th century, and the name's kind of stuck. All right, he wasn't the first person to come up with a Ponzi scheme, but the schemes ever since have been named after him. So, what are the key ingredients for a Ponzi scheme? What is a Ponzi scheme? Essentially, a Ponzi scheme is an enormous fraud, built normally around the idea that there is such a thing as a free lunch. You can get something for nothing. Okay, the end result is the fraudster takes your money and spends it. And that's it. Chances of you recovering anything, very small. So how's that going to work? How can someone set up a scheme whereby you, an otherwise intelligent person, hand over lots of money, okay, which eventually disappears? I reckon there are 3 ingredients, right? 3 vital ingredients. Number 1, the story. All right, a convincing story, an investment opportunity that you cannot miss out on. You can't afford to miss out on. Okay, Charles Ponzi came up with this idea, all right, that you could buy US mail vouchers overseas and redeem them in the US for more than you paid for them. All right, he had this little scam going, and he thought lots of investors would want in to that part of the action. He promised 50% returns in a matter of months, when interest rates in the US were way lower than that. Okay, or perhaps what you do, the recent UK fraud, for example, is you say to your investors, look, I've discovered an opportunity. Okay, only I really know about it, or I've got the expertise to exploit it. We've got these shipping companies, import-export companies. They need short-term finance. They get themselves into trouble. I provide loans at 20% a month, okay? 20% a month to these companies, and they're reliable payers, so I can offer you 13% a month. Can't offer you everything, it's got admin costs to pay and so on. And investors think, well, 13% a month? When the Bank of England base rate's way below that, and I don't trust the mainstream banks, blimey, that's worth having, right? So you need a story, you need a convincing investment story, and usually it's based around some little opportunity that no one else has spotted, or that you have the particular expertise to exploit, and investors must get in quick, okay, and be amongst the first to enjoy the benefits of this fantastic opportunity. Number 2, you need to be an incredibly good salesperson, all right? And all of the major Ponzi fraudsters are exactly that, okay? They're good talkers. It helps that they arm themselves with helicopters, fast cars, flash country houses, all paid for by you, of course, ultimately, all right? Swimming pools, they throw great parties, they claim a big contacts book, all right? The whole thing is designed to make you think they're entirely credible people, all right, who want nothing more than to offer spectacular returns to their investors and make a little bit on the side, of course. All right, so you need the story, you need the person, and then you need some credibility. All right, so what you do is you get your first few investors to invest with you, promising, let's say, 13% per month, and you actually pay them the interest on their capital. All right, you send them a check, the early investors, and they think, wow, I really can earn 13% per month. Okay, if you just send them one of the first checks, all right, then what you need to do is 2 things. First of all, encourage those early investors to reinvest from then on. So you say, well, actually, I'm not going to pay you returns in cash. You're better off staying in the scheme and accumulating your returns compound, because you make more money that way. Okay? And of course, you want them to rush around telling all their friends about this fantastic scheme that actually pays out 13% a month. Okay? That's how you start to hook people. Okay? The story spreads. People can't resist the opportunity to make that kind of money. They're made to feel almost stupid for missing out on the opportunity. And they tell their family, their friends, and so on, anyone they work with, and slowly the pool of investors prepared to put money in on the promise of these fantastic returns grows. And provided the pool of investors then grows nice and steadily, all right? The fraudster has always got some money. There's no investment going on at all. The fraudster's always got enough money, number one, to fund the lifestyle that convinces people in the first place that this is a great investor and great investment opportunity. And of course, it allows the fraudster at the middle of the whole thing to pay off a few of the early investors just to convince them that there really is some kind of investment going on behind the scenes, okay? Now, Ponzi schemes can go on quite some time, years, all right, but eventually they collapse, normally for one or two reasons. Either investors in the scheme get suspicious that they can't get their money back out, okay, or regulators wake up to the fact there is a scheme out there offering sort of unrealistic returns and investigate and eventually unravel the whole thing, all right? But the problem is it can take years before that happens, by which point, huge amounts of the money invested may have disappeared. All right, in the recent UK case, for example, it's estimated that the fraudster at the centre of it took in something like 115 million, and there may be only about 2 or 3 left. The rest was spent on a lavish lifestyle, fast cars, renting expensive properties, massive parties, etc., etc., etc. Okay? Now you might say, why do people fall for these schemes? Okay? People have lost, hundreds of thousands or millions in some cases in the US in the Madoff case. What goes wrong? All right, unfortunately, 2 things. All of us assume we are not too greedy and we are not too stupid. All right, now what I mean by that is if someone convincingly offers you up to 13% per month, okay, it's tempting to take it. After all, we've had the credit crunch. Again, a lot of investors in the recent UK scheme felt that the banks had let them down, the mainstream financial institutions had let them down, so what better than to kind of get around the greedy banks? But unfortunately, that meant being fleeced by someone even greedier. All right, and secondly, we all think we'd spot a problem and get out soon enough. We're not going to be the last person left without a chair in the musical chairs game, if you like. All of us think we can spot the top of the property market. Okay, all of us think we can spot the top of the stock market, and I'm afraid many people drawn into these Ponzi schemes may suspect something is up, but they think, well, that's all right, I'll get out before everybody else does. And of course, most of them never do. All right. Now, how do you spot a Ponzi fraud? Well, they all look different. Okay, obviously the next big one won't look exactly like Madoff's scheme, won't look exactly like the last one in the UK, so you have to have your wits about you, okay? So here are some tips, and some of these come straight from the SEC website in the US, all right? So here are some key tips. Number 1, all right, there is no such thing as a free lunch. If someone offers you high investment returns for little or no risk, chances are, all right, they cannot deliver, okay? Simple as that. Number 2, here's a clever one, overly consistent returns. What Madoff did, for example, in the US was he didn't offer a ridiculous level of return, but he offered it incredibly consistently. Even as markets dipped and ebbed and flowed, he was able to keep, so he claimed, pumping back these paper returns to investors. That's highly unlikely, okay? Markets have a habit of going down as well as up, and that means anyone offering to kind of constantly beat the market or hammer out those fluctuations is probably fibbing. Next, dubious investments. Okay, investments either you've never heard of, they're incorporated overseas, okay, or an unlicensed seller, somebody who's not on the books of the Financial Services Authority here or the SEC in the US. Okay, so dubious sounding investments or a dubious sounding seller. 2 other keys to look for. Complex, secretive strategies. Okay, opportunities that sound too good to be true. Remember, in financial markets, most of the best opportunities are exploited very, very quickly, very, very early on. Arbitrage, as it's known, is very difficult. So if someone comes to you and says, I've spotted this massive gap in the market, you ask yourself the question, have they really? Okay, and could that last for years? Next, any problems with paperwork or difficulty receiving payments. Okay, once you've committed your cash, and hopefully at this point you haven't, watch out for any suggestion you can't get your money back, okay, or you can't make redemptions. Now, by that point, it may already be too late, okay, but you need to be fairly on the ball as to how and when you can pull money out of any scheme you invest with. But I think the principal piece of advice is simply this, okay, if somebody offers you something that sounds too good to be true, it almost certainly is. And be wary of people in flash cars, flash suits, clearly I'm not a Ponzi fraudster, all right, who offer you a lifestyle, all right, which simply is one that you're not used to. That's often a big part of these schemes, okay, the opportunity to join an exclusive club, all right, and usually It requires your hard cash to become a member, and it's cash that you're unlikely to ever see again. Okay, so by all means, join a club, but please don't use it as an opportunity to make daft investments.